Okay, sorry. So I guess we'll get started. If anybody else joins us, then they can come and grab a seat. So welcome to January. Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a great Christmas and New Year celebration. And we're going to kick off 2017 on the right foot. Hopefully this will work for me this time. There we go. So we're going to go through just a couple items, some updates for everybody, kind of what's happening, our program, some ideas that we plan on happening this year, some items about our website, redefining kind of what our direction is, what we've kind of, what Janice, Frankie, myself kind of thought about pushing forward in 2017, some changes to really help put some structure behind where we are today. And then we're going to hold just our AGM to see what our executive will look like for this coming year. So we'll get started actually with our program. The items in red actually have not been entirely confirmed just yet. We have to firm up the actual date and times. But the items in black here, February 16th, we won't actually be physically in the room here. We're going to have a webinar just because February is a hard time with weather. We can't really predict that quite well. Even January is a hard time, but we're lucking out with great weather right now. So it'll be online, and it's going to be Shirley Sturdivant talking about gathering oral histories. And I think that's a great presentation. I've seen it once before, and it really helps to put things in perspective, especially after the holidays, where we've got together with family, we've talked about a lot about stories and shared ideas. So it'll be helping to put that down on paper. So the link will actually go up by this weekend, so you can register for that online. That'll be on our website as well, and there'll be an event on Facebook in case that's how you connect with us there. March 23rd, we'll be back here in the library with Linda Karup. She'll be talking about getting the most from land records. And if anyone knows Linda, she's done a lot of work with research projects. She's written numerous books on land records. Her specialty area is around Prince Edward County, that general vicinity, Quinte area. But she will have some information about specifically here in Hamilton. April 20th, we just have to firm up who's going to be here from the archives, but we're going to have the Archives of Ontario come and present to us, starting your research at the archives. So how do you, when you go to the archives, what do you need to get started there? And then we're going to follow that up. That's going to be on the Thursday. On Saturday, we're organizing a group research trip to the archives. We're going to have special archivists on hand to help everybody, if it's your first time or your 100th time going. I'm sure it'll be a great experience for everybody. And I'll talk a bit more about that on the next slide. May 18th, Lynn Palermo will be here talking about planning your own Who Do You Think You Are experience. And that kind of leads into our summertime. You know, when everyone goes away on vacation throughout the summer, some road trips, it's nice weather, you can really talk about going and walking in your ancestors' footsteps. And the Who Do You Think You Are experience, I think, is a great idea to do that. I've done it once before, planning a trip down to Belleville and actually walking into my ancestors' property and seeing kind of what they have. What, you know, this cemetery that I found that land once belonged to my 6th great-grandfather. And to find out that I'm standing in a spot where he once stood, you know, gives you kind of the chills. So she'll be here talking about planning that experience. And then June 24th, we're looking to have a group tour with Robin McKee and a tour of Hamilton Cemetery. The theme is to be decided, but we are looking, I think, right now at the Hamilton first, so some of the first settlers in Hamilton, which is always Robin's great for cemetery tours. If anybody's been on them, they're just amazing. And I believe before that, he actually has a schedule for this year coming out, and there's some really good ones too for other Saturdays in the month. So stay tuned for that. The research trip is Saturday, April 22nd. Registration will open early next month once we get that up on our website. This is how I always justify it. Parking is $14 for the day when you go there. The bus will be $10 to $14 a person. So you can take the bus we're going to organize, save on the parking fee, save on driving. And starting here in Hamilton Mountain, we're going to do a pickup at East Burlington and then off to the archives as well. Space will be limited only because this is a Saturday. We could order 2 buses or people, but it's a Saturday at the archives. It's limited resources in terms of the archivists that they're going to be able to bring in. So we're just trying to estimate around 50 people, and that's just for the bus. If anybody wants to show up on their own, drive themselves, that's fine. But we want to get a head count for that as well, just so we know the archives can let them know. You're going to expect about 60 or 70 people. And then we're going to follow that up with a And it sells out really, really well, especially if anybody's never been before. This is the perfect opportunity to go, because you're going to have anybody there who's been there before. Myself, I've been countless times, and all the archivists that are there, they're excellent, absolutely excellent. We ran a trip for the Great Canadian Genealogy Summit, and we've actually had 80 people go to the archives that day, and that was the most the archives have ever hosted in a single day, and it blew their minds. They were able to actually manage that many people and that many requests and concerns and helping everybody, but they really stepped up. So I know handling 50 people will be perfect. You know, everyone gets really good hands-on experience, and the archivists are there to help explain anything you need. The web presence, so we've made a significant investment in really trying to add more content to our members-only area. Janice has been scanning like crazy to get more content up into our members-only area, and that'll continue to grow. The more we make changes to our website, it's only to help better our virtual presence online rather than actually have a physical location. We'll talk a bit more about that coming up. Starting February 1st, we're going to have our branch blog on our website, and that's going to go back and look at some of our newsletters we've had in the past and look at some information that might be still relevant to republish those, as well as you'll find out on the next slide, we're going to get some assistance in helping to actually author some blog posts as well, which will be great. And if you have anything you want to see on our website, some information you think we could add more resources about this particular item, let us know, because we can always go out and source it, build it on there, and it's there for you, right? This website is for members and for the public, so if you have any ideas, let us know. We've been doing some outreach. As I mentioned, I think last month, I've been at Westmount Secondary School building a relationship there with the history department, and they are very excited to have me go back in February to talk about using genealogical records. I was there in November, and we talked about, with the class there, about what is genealogy. And a lot of the kids were, oh, well, I have, my grandfather, I know about him, and oh, we talked about that during the war lesson last year. We talked about this. They all had a general understanding of kind of what genealogy was, but taking to that next level, and did you know that you can use these records? And you could look at this particular record to help prove that fact that they were here, a voter list to help prove residency, that type of thing, making that connection. So we're actually going to talk about genealogical records in general and give them a good understanding of what's available for someone who might be in their 60s to 100 years old, living in the Hamilton area, because they're actually going to go out and do oral history interviews at a senior's home. So that actually, that's why it's tied into our webinar, because the week following the presentation from Shirley on writing oral histories, the class is going to go out and do that. So it's going to tie in really well to get these high school students out into the community, doing a lot more talking about genealogy with people, sharing those stories. It's great that, between the branch and whatnot with OGS, we try to go out and share more information and have more conversations, but it's limited with the resources we have, right? And with volunteers, but getting the school and classes involved and kids who have so much more energy, it's going to be great, I think. And especially this will tie into the fact that some students in the class have shown interest in writing blog posts for us. So they can actually take more information and go back and republish it online for us, and we can share more information that way from a different perspective entirely. The Archives Awareness Week is coming up this April, the first week of April, and I'll be speaking at the Hamilton Public Library downtown. A Lemon and Lemon Tree is a presentation that I gave at the Great Canadian Genealogy Summit, and everyone really liked it. It was talking about looking at names in certain locations and how you can differentiate different names from different people. When you have, for example, like I have 6 Williams in a row, William, and then a Samuel, and then another couple Williams, right? Typical English naming pattern, as you can probably tell. So it's talking about that, how to look at certain areas and geographically differentiate these names between people. So more information to come for sure. They haven't actually announced the whole schedule yet, but I'll let you guys know. It's Monday, April 3rd in the afternoon at the library, so feel free to stop by. So talking about kind of redefining our direction, we received notice from the Hamilton School Board back in July, letting us know that they were not going to renew our lease with our room that we had, our classroom. the agreement that we had with them really did not put us in a situation where they had to give us enough notice, but in terms of we had to give them enough notice, about 6 months notice if we wanted to leave. So the lease was not really written in our favor, but basically we spent a lot of time, Janice and myself primarily, looking at different places of where we could go. And there just is not any space in the city that's we're able to actually move in ready like that with low cost, like we were getting at the school board at Lincoln Alexander, and have accessibility, right? And something that really struck the court to me was that, you know, the classroom was great in terms of a place for, you know, a research team was working there excellently, but accessibility in terms of a collection that we may want to have there, it's not accessible except for on days where you make an appointment to go and no one can just walk right in, right? And the fact that it's in a school where you have a buzzer on the front door, you have to get buzzed in and sign in, there's a lot of, you know, resistance of people wanting to go and actually do that. So compared to a library where you walk right in and it's public building, it's public space, that's kind of what we've been looking for, still looking for a place. We have been lucky enough that we got storage facilities, 2 units for all of our equipment and furniture and whatnot that was in the classroom. And so all the furniture is in 1 unit, and most of our collection in terms of any duplicate collection we have is in another unit. Some people aren't aware, though, that most of our collection that we had in the classroom, for the most part, was a duplicate of what's down at the library as well, whether it's the original or not. Most of the collection is available downtown at the public library. So our plan is actually to create more of a satellite location up here on the mountain, because some people don't like going downtown to the central branch. I mean, it is downtown Hamilton at night sometimes, you know, after work. I know for myself, plus I got to pay for parking. And I think I'm very selfish about that. I hate paying for parking when I have to go to a library or a public place like that. So we are looking for a place. I've actually contacted the manager of this library here at Sherwood and asked, is there any space available? And they said they have talked to their director of collections and let us know. But there is space. If you look at their 929 collection up on the main floor, it is about a foot wide, and it consists of a lot of the how-to or genealogy for dummies collection of books, nothing really extravagant in terms of collections or locations for researching. So we really want to help a library up here maybe thrive in genealogy because we really can't seem to find a facility at this point. I mean, there probably is some availability eventually coming up, maybe in the next year or two, so I mean, we have to really look at that down the road. But when we look at a lot of the other OGS branches as a whole, there are not many that actually have fixed facilities of their very own. You look at, there's Oxford and Brant that just come to mind, but we were very much unique in our own regard that we were actually paying a lease on a specific location. Some of the branches, Niagara's done really well with actually doing some co-location with other groups within the town and the municipality, and that's something we can look at as well. I mean, once we start building those relationships now that we've actually taken a step back and said, okay, this isn't really feasible right now, we can start to build some relationships with the Hamilton Mountain Heritage Group as well to say, maybe we could do something together, right? But even coming to the thought of actually coming here to Sherwood was a bit of a step outside of our comfort zone because we were really looking for something more towards the other side of the mountain or a facility of our very own. And we kind of went, you know what, this is great for now. Let's see what we can do in the future. So the rest of our meetings, other than February, will be here. And then next year, we're still going to do some planning and decide kind of what that direction will look like. But we will let you know every step of the way. That's kind of what our commitment has been now. We really want to let everybody know. Unfortunately, towards the end of the summer, it's really hard when you're kind of off. You know, OGS generally takes a bit of a holiday over the summer, and we're really trying to manage our schedules the best we could to try to facilitate a move. So there may have been some lack of communication during that time, and for that, you know, I can even say I'm sorry for that. But in terms of as we move forward, we really need to push and help everyone stay in the loop because, you know, everyone may have a different thought or may have a connection to help us find facilities or help give us some ideas of how we move forward. So please, if you have any ideas, please step up and let us know. We'd love to hear. And if you want to volunteer, please let us know. We'd love for more people to volunteer. So the last point here is, in order to help keep some of the costs down from our storage units. There is some furniture in there that we just don't need to keep anymore. In terms of perhaps filing cabinets is a big issue. Most of one unit is entirely filled with filing cabinets, and the contents of there, we've digitized most of it. So the paper doesn't really prove value just to store. So we've gotten that digitized. The books that are in there, we're looking to put in here. Once we get that kind of taken and planned out, the plan is to start selling off some of the furniture to help pay off some of this rent. We can get rid of one unit, keep one, and bring our costs down. That's kind of what the plan is. Any questions about that at all? Now's the time more than any. Okay. So basically we're looking at putting more resources either available online through our members only area or in the library, again, putting our collection here at Sherwood. And if Sherwood does not have any space, there's also the Red Hill Library, Turner Park as well we can contact to try to find just some space to put them. And I mean, from the classroom itself, it was everything that was in the cedar cabinets on the one wall that can really, it's a lot of books in terms of using it. So if we find that there were a lot of duplicates in that collection when we did pack it up, so our plan is also that we'll look to probably sell some of our collection that are duplicates that we just don't need to have 3 or 4 copies of. We can keep one for us, and there is a copy downtown at the library, so we have 2 copies in our branch collection. But in terms of having 3 or 4 copies of the same book, it doesn't prove any value just to store. So we're going to talk about that more for spring 2017. And our vision, again, is to push for a larger virtual presence with more accessibility to genealogy resources while having a smaller physical presence. Okay, so we're looking away from actually possibly even having a physical location. If that we can't seem to find a space that works for us, then we just aren't going to have one. And that's kind of what OGS has looked at across all the branches. Most of them have just meeting space and the collections in the library, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Is kind of joining that kind of that bandwagon, that movement, because if you look for membership, membership is declining across most of the society, and we just have to really look at kind of what our expenses are going to be going forward, and if we can keep those down, then we can keep going a lot longer in terms of operations. So that's kind of that piece of it as well. So as of right now, the current executive is looking to remain on. There hasn't been any volunteers to step up into a role specifically. There's been some interest, but no actual commitment at this point. For chair, Janice Brain to remain with Catherine, sitting as past chair, obviously. Vice chairs, we're looking to eliminate the first and second vice chair and just Frankie and myself as vice chairs together. I have myself here as treasurer interim. This year originally was interim. That I wasn't going to continue on to do that, but I'm going to continue and look for a replacement, whether it be perhaps an accounting student at Mohawk, that type of thing, to really help alleviate just some of that paperwork piece of it. And we have currently no secretary, so we've been managing between the 3 of us when we get together. Okay, and I believe right now Steve, would you like to call?
Unless there is anyone in this room that would like to take them, I'm sorry if you don't know, I'm Vice President of the OGS Board. If there's anyone who wants to compete against these folks, then I invite you to do so. If not, then I would just acclaim these people to these positions and congratulate them. They're volunteers. They've done a heck of a job. And, you can't get any more dedicated than these folks here. And, if we can't support them, then we got to really wonder why we're doing this. And so congratulations to the jury for doing what you've been doing. And
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think, and I'll rehash just that fact of it. It's that, a lot of this is volunteer. Well, entirely is volunteer. But when you look at the time commitment to actually do a lot of the big changes that we had over the summer, it is a lot of time, a lot more than just a typical volunteer position. And for that, as we move forward, there's going to be less and less as we have, physical locations take up a lot more time, a lot more resource, a lot more volunteer time. So as we move forward, we're going to have less of that. So if you're looking to step up to join, the time commitment will be significantly less. And if you have any questions or concerns or anything, just come and talk to us. We're open. We'd love to talk. You can't shut me up at all. Janice can vouch for that. So again, so this is exactly what our executive will be for this year, our branch council. Okay. A quick slide for membership. Our membership count over time, and this kind of proves kind of where we are. I mean, we are at the end of January, but at this time, usually, this is kind of where we've been sitting, and the membership doesn't actually run out until the end of January, so technically. So we usually do see the spike happen at the end of January, February to get us back up there, and I wouldn't expect it to be really anywhere higher than 215, but I expect it to be somewhere around there. It's just the nature of the beast. I mean, I renewed today. That's just what happens. You forget about it, time happens, and so more people will as time goes on. So we will keep you up to date how these numbers grow, but if this number does not go up, this is kind of where we're sitting at, right? So we look at the expenses. You have to look at the revenues brought in by this, and can it support a physical location? At this rate, no, right? So that's also where we're at. Okay. So that brings me to the end of our opening, our AGM, if you will. And I'm going to move over to anybody have any questions? Just want to make sure. Yes, Linda.
Are there any coordinators or conveners?
So at this,
like there always have been. So, but there are missing. They're not happening the same. So
very true.
Just eliminated.
Not at all. I think right now we've really been in a hiatus state because a lot of the convener piece of it relied on a physical location. So as we move forward, I mean, that's something that we have to kind of go back and look at to say, how's that going to look? I mean, you're great for research and leading that. And so, I mean, in terms of a physical location to go and do that, we need to provide that to you if that's kind of what you're looking for. And if we can get a facility here, right, or in the central library downtown to coordinate time for you to go to do that, that's what we need to do. But that physical location to actually go and research like we had at the school just isn't going to be. So things will look a little bit different as we move forward. In terms of the conveners, we haven't had anybody resign from those today, and no one's competed for that today. So I assume that's kind of what we're going to continue on as.
So the website will just have the same list of books?
And until somebody resigns for now, until if anything were to happen that way, it'll still list that. If we can put a note to say, this is kind of in the hiatus state, if you wish to call it. But I see where you're going with that for sure. So I mean, in terms of research, that's something that we could take back and try to figure out first, because it has been a while, right? Since.
Well, there hasn't been, as far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been any research, really.
Exactly, right? And I mean, in terms of revenue, I will mention to that fact as well, at the AGM, the OGS AGM in June at the conference, the Hamilton branch produced the largest amount of revenue from research out of all the branches. So, I mean, that is a huge concern for us, number one, but the hardest part is right now is just trying to find the facilities for that. And I mean, we can work together to try to find what you want to kind of, if you're looking to continue on in that role, if you'd like to go to the central library or that type of thing, what we can do to kind of help facilitate that. Okay? Any other questions? So some updates from the genealogy community. Library and Archives Canada released their mid-January update on the CEF World War I service file project, and currently they're on the surname Murray. They're about, you'll see here, over halfway in to getting this done. Their target is 2018 for completion, so we have another 2 years, more or less, to the end of 2018 to get done. And so, you mean, when you start looking at some of these names, follow the Library and Archives Canada blog. You will find updates that way. I'll tell you about some other sources where you can follow this along, because I think when you come to surnames, you really watch that every month, and I did for the longest time until one of my surnames came up finally last September, and I said, okay, great, I can actually go in and see my family now rather than have to pay, because I paid so much money to try to get the copies before they came digitized. So now I'm just sitting back and waiting for the rest of them. So again, they're on the surname Murray. The FTDNA ancestry import. We talked about DNA for the past couple sessions, and I mentioned something about being able to do an ancestry test and exporting your results from Ancestry and importing that up into Family Tree DNA. And Family Tree DNA has offered the service, and it costs about $40 to do this. And you can actually then get your matches against the Family Tree DNA database, and that's for the autosomal DNA, the Ancestry test. However, Ancestry changed their chipset of their DNA, of how they actually, the order in which DNA is analyzed, so it no longer matches Family Tree DNA. They did this back in July, and Family Tree DNA has been really pushing to try to drive, to match that change. Basically, in layman's terms, if you had a DNA sample of 1 to 10 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they switched it around and it went 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 2, 3. So all the DNA is there, it's just in a different format. So it doesn't match, and whoever knows why that happened, I'm not entirely sure, but basically the test isn't the same pattern anymore. So they can't just match it. They have to actually go back and realign everything to find the right match, so they can actually do that. And I mean, as you look at this, it's a good, personally, this is a personal opinion, not representing OGS, I believe that it was done as a competitor edge. I've seen it done before with other companies where you make a small change so it no longer is compatible. Compact, if anyone remembers Compact, and certain printers could work for certain things, and only compact printers could work on compact PCs for a while. That was that kind of thing. But again, they've been lining this up. They said it should be fixed in mid-2016. Ignore the S on 2016. It should be fixed mid-2016. So that's kind of our plan. They've said it now since July. So we can hear back. I feel like with the upcoming genealogy events that are happening, the large genealogy events coming up, there's going to be more information about this, because it's a huge question. We've always been able to export from Ancestry and import into Family Tree DNA and get those matches there. The alternative to that is using GEDmatch and exporting from Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, and you can import it into GEDmatch and get those matches all together in one database. And it just expands all of your matches at that point. So this piece of it, I was lucky enough to do this before this went down, before they changed their chipset. So I got my matches on Ancestry, and then I got different matches on Family Tree DNA for the people who actually did the Family Tree DNA test and not the Ancestry test. That's the benefit of it. And you'll be able to see when this comes back up, I'm very hopeful it will, you'll be able to actually do that import again. You can get those matches and see. They have different tools for analyzing the data. And I think, in my own opinion, Family Tree DNA does have better tools for analyzing your actual DNA. Ancestry does a really good job of making it look really pretty and really user-friendly for someone just getting started. But they have very powerful tree matching tools that no one can beat. That's the Ancestry edge. That you can actually match from tree to tree to tree. They'll do your closest relative and that type of thing, and you're able to actually see matches by name. Family Tree DNA just can't touch that just yet. I mean, they don't have that tree component as robust as Ancestry does. This really struck home to me. London, England databases. John Reed. How many people know John Reed? He's out in Ottawa. He has a blog called Canada's Anglo-Celtic Connections, and he's actually summarized 96 online databases in a list on his blog that range from electoral rolls, burial registers, workhouse admissions, actual cemetery records, it's for the surrounding area around London, England. And I was surprised when I went through it. There's a lot of databases I had never even heard of. And I do professional research in and around London area. And there's some smaller sites you just haven't heard of. Databases that are in some of these sites. So for example, Deceased Online is a very good tool to use if you're doing research in the UK. But there are some cemeteries and different records and different ways you can go about looking at records on there that he actually lists out in his blog. So check that out. This was just interesting to me because I talk about this particular cemetery all the time. I live in Burlington, and I have for a number of years. And in this particular cemetery, people just aren't aware, generally are not aware that it exists. And I lived just down the road from this cemetery for a number of years and did not know it was there. And it's the Union Burying Ground. And it was highlighted this week on Inside Halton. And it's between the Sleep Country and Sears Home Store in the IKEA Plaza. There's this red brick fence that goes along the road on Plains Road, and there's a middle black gate that goes around that corner. Anyone who knows that area really well, you'll realize it when you drive by it now, because you'll see the headstones in there. But I've driven by it for years and went, I never saw that. I never realized that. What was there? There's 2 War of 1812 veterans buried there, and a lot of the founding families in Burlington. And that's a picture of it, actually, right? And I mean, it looks like a cemetery. I mean, you have the gates, you have the headstones in there, and traffic's usually backed up along Plains Road, and you can look in here, but you just don't. I think it's because the stairs come up so high, you just don't see it easily. And I shopped at Fortino's for years and behind there, and I never saw this. So every time this comes to fruition, it comes to light, I always mention to everybody again and saying, check it out. Like, it's really cool. The gates here, you can't get in through the front. There's actually a gate on the side here, a black gate. You have to go in there and then up to the side. It is private property, but they do allow people to go and actually go through the cemetery. And they offer tours in the summer as well to understand some of the pioneer families of Burlington. So yeah, check it out when you drive by there next time. It's pretty cool. This is actually part of the 2016 wrap-up from Krista Cowan on YouTube on the Ancestry channel. And they talked about the year in review with Ancestry. And I thought this was just really cool, a good snapshot image to see kind of what Ancestry has. They have 19 billion records. That's crazy. That's crazy. In 80 different countries, right? There's 80 million family trees. Crazy, right? And 8 billion different connections have been made. They talk about, down here, these are some more, just some factoids, that 2.5 million have been people tested, DNA tested. I think it actually hit 3 million now. Yeah. 3 million. Which you think about it and you go, okay, why am I not getting more matches? Right? 3 million people, there's got to be something, right? So there's 75 million searches on the website daily, right? And 14 million app downloads, the Ancestry app for smartphone, iPhone, Android. And that's growing. I mean, as people are progressing to mobile devices, it's a great app to have on the go, especially when you're trying to compare DNA and you're trying to explain to someone what DNA looks like, your origins. You can just show them here. This is my origins right here. I do that all the time. People say, you know, what you said 43% Irish. I know, but I'm going to explain why 43% Irish, and I can just pull it up on my phone really quickly. So some events and some neat things happening just on the horizon. Family Tree University. How many people have heard of Family Tree University? Okay, this is a great resource. Check it out. It's online, familytreeuniversity.com. They have tons of courses from instructors that you'll see at conferences all around, and some speakers on there that actually just you never hear of because they only do courses for Family Tree University. Cluster and Collateral Research 101 course is actually coming up. It begins on the 23rd. I believe that's Monday or Sunday, somewhere around there. And it's Lisa also. She's a well-known speaker, blogger, writer. She's really focusing on writing right now. But this actually talks about how and when and which records to use when doing collateral research and cluster research. And what is that when you actually go through it? It's a research technique. And she explains that a lot more. It's $100 US, but it's over 4 weeks. So, I mean, it's something you can commit to, and it's something you can just have fun with, right? There's lots of courses, lots of them starting at different times. So if you're not particularly interested in this one course, I pulled this up just because of the starting date, check out Family Tree University. It's a great place to go, especially if you want something to do while you're at home, in your PJs. I love doing stuff like that. I cannot miss mentioning Roots Tech. It's coming up rather quickly, February 8th to 11th in Salt Lake City, of course. There's over 200 lessons being offered. They have a massive expo hall, huge, massive. And they have added support at the Family History Library. So if you usually go to the Family History Library, they have people in attendance to help you, but they add a lot of support during this time because of the amount of people jumping in on Salt Lake. Last year there was about 60,000 attendees, which is just astronomical when you think about, everybody there loves family history. So no one there gets glazed over when you start talking to them about, your grandmother or whatnot, your origins, because you're always paying attention to say, maybe we have connections, right? Especially when I talk about the Quackenbush name. I think I mentioned Quackenbush is in New York State. Anybody from New York, I had to talk to because you never know. Maybe their grandmother was a Quackenbush. There's Quackenbushes everywhere. The registration rate is still low. It's $209 US. It'll go up to $269 probably in the next week or so. But check it out. I mean, it is kind of last minute still to make plans to go. But even next year, I plan on going again next year, and it'll be at the end of February, February 28th, I believe it starts. So later in the month, which I think will work really well. So check it out for sure. I will mention, people forgot about this last year, I think, for the most part. They actually stream a lot of their sessions, the most popular ones, online on their website for free. So even if you can't make it, you can still go to their website and check out some of those classes. And they keep them on there recorded for most of the year, I believe until probably October-ish, about there, before they take them down. So check it out, because the speakers you're going to get there are speakers you're not going to probably see in Canada, I'm going to say. Some you will see probably at OGS conference, but for the most part, a lot of them just don't come to Canada. So for sure, watch the Roots Tech website. This is a picture actually of the conference hall, or the main hall where they have a lot of their presentations. And every time I look at the picture, I go, there's so many people. They're just, and they're all there for family history. It's amazing. This is one that's not so well known. It's a Legacy Genealogy Cruise. So there are some presenters that actually go on board on the cruise ship. It leaves September 22nd to the 29th. It's a week long. Departs from Seattle, goes to Astoria, San Fran, and Victoria, all up the coast, and then back down to Seattle on Royal Caribbean. And they have top instructors. I know a number of the ones that you're going to see who've written a lot of books. There's really, Blaine Bettinger, I think, is gone. It's really focused on DNA. So it really is a place to go if you want to go enjoy a nice cruise and get some genealogy at the same time. Prices begin at $428 a person, double occupancy. Check it out, legacyfamilytree.com. This is the 14th year they've done it. Last year they did one. There's actually another type of cruise, I believe, and it left from, I think, out somewhere around Alabama, one of the ports there, and then for a week long. But it's, hey, if you want to go to the Pacific Coast, nice way to do it. I'll let Jane finish writing. Yeah, good. Family Tree Magazine. So some people say, magazines are kind of here and there. I want an electronic magazine, for example. Family Tree Magazine is the place to be when you want information that's always on the cutting edge. Diane Haddad is the editor, and she's done a great job constantly putting information out there weekly in the weekly mailing list via email. If you aren't signed up for this, sign up for it, because you're going to get all the latest information from the genealogy community, news. Probably when they fix the family tree, DNA, ancestry, you'll probably hear about it there first. This week's feature is 10 free websites for finding details about your ancestors' lives, social history websites. And again, the keyword free, love it. So check it out. And I believe if you sign up, you'll get the latest mailing list eventually, like in the next couple days after you sign up. And it's free to sign up, so why not? The magazine, I believe, is still $30 a year for a subscription, so it's still worth it. But you will find in there, I believe at the bottom of their website, there's certain articles, you get to the bottom and they want you to be a subscriber to actually see some of the more detailed ones. But you can't beat free information, so check it out. And I will stop here. There's some Canadian news blogs, and I have to say these three have really done a great job of constantly putting out content. It's very hard to blog, number one. It's very hard to blog consistently, number two. It's extremely hard to blog consistently with up-to-date information. all the time. And John Reed, Canada's Anglo-Celtic Connections, Lorraine with Olive Tree Genealogy, and Gail Dever, Genealogy a la carte, are three of the top ones you really want to follow. Follow their blog. If you sign up on their website, you'll get it in your email box. John Reed's comes in, I think, every morning, somewhere, I think, around between like 8 o'clock, I think I get it, which is nice morning reading. And it's not a lot of information, but there may be 2 or 3 new blog posts on there that have great reading behind that. And do not forget to follow the OGS blog. Alan Campbell has done a great job of submitting information on there, and we've gotten some professional genealogists to actually write some blog posts to go on there as well. And if you have any interest in blogging, starting a blog and whatnot, this is probably the best place to start, right? Because you're surrounded by friends. Okay, so I think we'll take a bit of a break, and we'll come back and then we'll dive into Rejuvenate and Stimulate. Okay? Great. So this presentation I gave originally in Sarnia in Lambton last year, and then again in Oakville in September. And it really is talking about just taking a different look at your family history and re-looking at what you've done. And I think that's probably best for everyone in the room because no one here is just starting. So let's look at just that piece of it then. And we can probably go through this rather quickly. For anyone on the line who, I'm pretty sure everyone in the room knows me for me, but anyone who does not know about me, I'm a professional genealogist and a research coach. I help people with their research. I don't necessarily do a lot of the research for people for hire, but I rather help people through their own. I have an interest in family history for about 15 years, and I'm a member of all of these different groups down below. OGS, APG, GSG, ISGB, FH, LMLP, QR, STUV, NYG, and B. Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms in this world. I always start this presentation with this particular question is, did you know that children who know stories about their family history, relatives that came before them, show higher levels of emotional well-being? And if anyone saw the Guardian newspaper this week, there's actually, they're talking about that again. They bring it up every once in a while. It hits the news. And it goes on to say the study that was done talks about family stories provide a sense of identity through time and help children understand who they are in the world. And I think that kind of hits home for me because I'm an only child. And so growing up, it was just myself and my parents. And I grew up in the country. It's very lonely. And so when you start looking at things to do, I found the family history book that was sitting on our shelf. And I pulled it off. I got it from Aunt Hilda. And I think I've told some people about Aunt Hilda. And I went through this book. And I just kept pulling it off the shelf and going through it and saying, this is really neat. Talking about my family home in Cornwall, England, and pictures of all these places and people. And going, well, I'm related to these people. You know, I have 7 aunts and uncles on one side and 6 aunts and uncles on the other, and I have lots and lots of cousins, but they all live, you know, in a distance away from me. So I grew up pretty much just the 3 of us at home. So it really helped me kind of dive into this world, in this my own little dream world of trying to understand how these people kind of were related, and who they were, you know. So this study was done from Emory University, and I urge anybody who's interested in just the facts behind it to check it out. It's a great study, and it's one of my favorites. So I talked about my family book that I got from Aunt Hilda. It came in 1999 because she didn't think we were going to make it to the year 2000. So she wanted to make sure everyone was well aware of you know, our family history before the big boom happened and like all the computers crashed and everything. So we got that book, and before I knew it, I was reading this linear chart going back all the way back to Christ, before Christ. And I'm thinking, that's crazy. How does that even work, right? Like, how can someone trace me back so far? So I kept taking it off the shelf, putting it back on the shelf, taking it off the shelf, putting it back on the shelf, and going, I like this. But somehow this book, even if I pull it off the shelf, I may not have always put it back, but my mom would always put it back. And I never quite knew why. She just didn't really want me looking through it. I think she realized maybe a lot of it didn't quite line up. I found some errors in the book that showed, for example, someone who was born in 1742 had a father who was born in 1774, after a long time after. So you're wondering, okay, how does this even work, right? And a lot of it goes back to the English naming patterns. There's lots of Williams and Samuels and Williams and Samuels and Charles. And in my talk, The Lemon and Lemon Tree, it really talks about Charles is the center point of it all, that there were two Charles Lemons. And one was very wealthy on one side of the family, and he had a wife and kids and everything, but she got them mixed up. They're both born in the same year, in the same area, but when you look at how they grew up and their kids' names and whatnot, you can actually break it out and find out which one's which. And the one, Charles Lemon, he had 3 kids. They all died before the age of 12. They all drowned. The other ones went on and had a Samuel and a William and a Samuel and a William, and I descend from that side. And Hilda seemed to think we came from this side. Unfortunately, that's completely incorrect. And so she happened to put a couple pictures in this book that was of this Samuel and the other one, Samuel and Thomas. And, you know, it was just one of those things, oh, they're just in there, they're one of the distant uncles. No, actually, we descend from this Samuel. And that's neat that she actually just happened to throw these in the book. So I started to go through this book and start to make my own connections out of it and say, this doesn't line up. And how could someone have a kid at the age of 102 or 103? You know, it just didn't seem really factual for someone who's 12 years old going, well, I know my parents are old, but I don't think this is going to work, right? So I got really interested in it, and that kind of really spun me on this path of actually doing my own family history. Just to go back and prove more facts about these, and put sources to this information, because in this book, there are no sources whatsoever. You can go back to every generation, and there's not even say I got it from this aunt or this cousin or this here as an oral history or a fact or a website. Nothing. Just lots of pictures of kings and queens of England, and going back to there. Of course, that sounds really interesting to someone who's 12 years old. And I have to admit, I did take the family tree to school all the time, and I was like, hey, friends, look at this. I'm related to these people. And they're like, okay, that's great. You can go sit in the corner. You know, go away. You're weird. But that was just something I did in the country. You grew up, and they kept me really focused on something different. So this family history, again, no sources, really limited information around how they found out information. Kind of, these two words kind of go hand in hand. They talk about rejuvenating this information that we have and stimulating it with more robust information, because all there was in here, there were some pictures, but no information about who they were, right? There was birth dates, marriages, deaths, and you're like, okay, that's great, but, you know, what else? So we want to add more information to it. So we're going to talk about some definitions, some guiding principles, some tools and resources, and then a little bit of discussion at the end. So rejuvenate, I say, is to make someone or something to feel like young, healthy, energetic, right? More or less. But we can take this term, basically say breathe new life into our pedigree, right? To stimulate, to make something more active, to cause or encourage something to happen or develop, to make someone excited or interested in something. Just make the pedigree more interesting, right? Rather than just those births, marriages, and deaths, right? Add more information to it. So this is kind of how I always go about talking to people when I first meet them who have never really done family history before. And some of you will probably know from friends and whatnot who have started, is they start to go say, well, you know, I have, you know, my grandfather, he was born here, he died here. I always say, if you're meeting someone on the street for the first time, what would you say to them? What would you tell them about you? What would you ask of them? Right? If I walked up to Frankie and said, hi, my name is Mike Quackenbush. I was born September 29th, 1990. I was married on this day. I'm married. I was married on this particular day, and I died on this day. She might run away if I said died. But what information does she really care about that? She doesn't care what my birthday is. Maybe my age, you kind of guess by looking at me. But when you take that type of term and put it into your family history, that's a lot what people are doing nowadays. They're just taking that basic information they find in a tree, putting it in, and what do you really know about the person? Not a lot. So some questions you can ask, I put some questions in here, like, do you travel? Where do you travel? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see and do? Because what you think you want to do, you might actually do one day, right? Your goals, your plans. Those are some questions you can ask. Ask these questions of your pedigree, right? Ask your family history this particular questions. Do these people like to travel? I don't know. Well, let's find out, right? Let's look at immigration records, for example. Different ship lists, that type of thing. What are your hobbies? That's a tough question to ask an ancestor, right? But you can look in places to find out that information. For example, my Charles Lemon was part of the Royal Agricultural Society in Cornwall, right? Which is neat to think, okay, I found that out in the newspaper that he has listed in this article, right? He had a very passion for politics, so I also found out in there. Do they have kids, grandkids? Those are questions we usually ask, but how can you take that to that next level, right? And just add more information. So think of when you walk down the street and you meet somebody for the first time, you want to know more information about them, spin it in your genealogy and say, what's a particular question you may ask? Are you interested in this? Ask it here, right? So kind of the guiding principles I always look at, and anyone in the professional world, I always overload people with this, but it's the GPS, the Genealogical Proof Standard, okay? And anyone who is not maybe in the professional world isn't maybe totally aware of this, and you don't need to follow this. I'm not going to hammer this home to say you need to do this, but it helps, okay? It helps to at least be aware of it. And again, it was published by the Board for Certification of Genealogists, BCG. They're kind of like a governing body in the States. And it's the official manual of standards for genealogy, okay? If you're really serious about it, this is something you probably want to do. They offer a certification. You can get your CG, certification, Certified Genealogist, designation from them by following this pattern, okay? And I always say this basically gets you from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible. That's kind of, I don't necessarily have the book on my desk and actually read it all the time. But when I get stuck on something and I want to know the most efficient way around, how can I document this, or am I doing this enough? It helps, especially with brick walls. So basically it answers this question: how can a researcher be assured that he or she is producing and receiving reliable results? By following this, you're pretty much guaranteed reliable results. This is the book. I have it in paperback. It was 20 bucks on Amazon. Easy to get. It's very thin. It just covers the 5 principles that we're going to talk about here. And the first one is talking about reasonably exhaustive research. How much research are you doing to prove this fact? Are you going into, for example, Ancestry, typing in the global search and looking for this person, this birth date, bam, found it, got the fact, put it in my tree, done? Or are you actually going back and looking and saying, is that birth fact actually a birth fact? I talk about it here. Order of evidence really plays key. If I find a baptism, for example, and it says 1893, I can't just assume that person was born in the same year, right? I see it a lot of the time in the public member trees on Ancestry. I see it a lot of the time in client work that I've received. They said, well, the person was baptized in this year. Well, clearly they were born then. Well, this person was 9 years old when they were baptized, right? So anyone who's been around the block a few times with genealogy has probably seen this once or twice. But you want to pay attention to what that source is that you're looking at, because that's kind of really important. When you look at reasonably exhaustive research, it is taking you to the next level, making sure you have the right fact, the right number of facts to support that. There's primary sources, secondary sources, all that. If you want to know more information about that, check it out online. Lots of places for that. But it basically goes back and says, do you have the right information and first-hand information, for example, to prove this fact? The second one is complete and accurate source citations. So that goes back to the exhaustive research. When I find everything, I want to document it properly. Okay? And now the guide says clear source information, allow others to trace back to the original record, and show the quality of the record used. I agree. However, I'm not a stickler for this whole order thing. There is evidence explained by Elizabeth Shawn Mills. It's a great book. I think it's great more for the US than Canada, in my own opinion. But when I build a cited source, I build it so that the person that I'm going to give it to can actually go back and find this exact source themselves. rather than me having to make a copy of it and put it on my records, I just leave the source. This is a copy. The title of the article is Robbery of Banknotes. It was in the column, the Oxford City Police Court, in the Oxford Journal. It was published the 29th of December, 1877, page 5, column 5, and I found it in the British Newspaper Archive. And I just put a link, URL here, and data accessed it. If, for example, the rights for the Oxford Journal fall off from the BNA, someone can go back and actually find the copy of it on microfilm and make a copy of it at some point, right? You just want to make sure that people can get back to that original fact, not necessarily it be so long and exuberant to say, I need to have every bit of information there, who the author was and everything. It's not necessarily needed in my opinion. If you can go back and find this is perfect. This is an example of one that I use a lot of the time because it's a perfect example of what Ancestry kind of lacks in some regard. This is a marriage record for my great-grandparents, the Howell Lake family marriage in the Presbyterian Church in Westmount, Quebec, Rejuvenate, if you're from Montreal. They have a section here called Citation Details, so you can pop over there, and you'll see here's the web address to the actual record, right? And if I click on that, you can also click that view record, view image record, right? You can click on that, but here's the URL to it as well. And this is the record over here, okay? Now, when I look at this page, there's a lot of information here, and I can get everything I need to document a source based on just this page, right? I know that I'm looking in this particular database, the Quebec Canada Vital Church Records, the Druin Collection. The Druin Collection is from the Druin Institute. I know Outremont is in Montreal. It's the Presbyterian Church. The year is 1919. It also shows me down here. And I look over here, and because this is a digital image, it's image 6 of 13. I can document that so that I don't actually have to go back and do a search to find this Howell marriage record. I can literally go and browse images in this collection and click on Outremont, Presbyterian, 1919, and then go to 6 of 12, or 6 of 13, and actually see this record. The source citation that they give here, I mean, it talks about Ancestry.com, Quebec Canada Vital Church Records. It goes through all this. It talks about the record is online in a database, but it's held in Provo, Utah, and I don't care personally. I want to know, how can I get this? Because this is what matters to me, right? I don't care if the database is backed up in Alaska. I want the record. So this is how I actually went through and just documented it. I just said Herbert Archibald Howell and Isabel Todd Lake marriage, 4th of June 1919. You'll see the Druin Collection at the top, image 6 of 13, Outremont Presbyterian Church in Montreal. The link to Ancestry, in case no one knew what Ancestry.com was when they saw this, and the data access that record. Okay, that's key. The data access is really key when you look at a lot of these databases, because these databases are sold a lot of the time with a term or contract with the original source. So if that contract ends, that database will come offline. You may not see that record again online. So putting the data access proves you saw it on that day. Okay, and that's really good when you're trying to share this information to other people, to say it was there, I saw it on that day. And that's good to make why you save images sometimes from there, because if they do happen to disappear, you have a copy of them as well. I like this image. The analysis and correlation of collected information. So it ensures the correct interpretation of the evidence and that the conclusion reflects all of the evidence you got. Okay? So if I found 4 different birth records, different from, perhaps one's a registration, one's another copy of registration, one's the actual document I have in front of me, one's really poor quality, one's quite vivid, right? You want to document all of these to say, if I have the really poor quality one and I say, oh, it looks like the 4th of October, but I find the clear one and it actually says the 8th of October, well, okay, anyone who's seen this has made the assumption it's the 4th of October, right? But I found the actual clear one and it says the 8th. So you want to go through and just make sure you document the fact that one exists that may not have the most clear information out there, okay? The resolution of conflicting information. So it allows you to draw a conclusion based on the information. And we're actually going to go back and talk about this a little bit more. This basically sound, reason, coherently written conclusion to eliminate preconceptions and explain how the evidence you have leads you to that conclusion. Okay, and I always call it cognitive bias. Just get rid of the information you think you know or you've heard, and just use the evidence you have at hand to make that conclusion. Even though I use this slide because this next slide actually works really well. This is a picture of my 2x great-grandfather, Joseph. He says, my son, Reg, and this is something he said, and it's been passed on in my family, and you'll see. It's a telephone game. Anyone who knows that and knows information changes over time, said, my son, Reg, is born in the home hospital. Quite kind of general, right? But you're like, okay, well, where is that, right? Reg said, I was born in the home hospital in St. Lambert. Okay, well, that makes sense, but how he was born there, but he didn't really know. It could have been maybe not in St. Lambert. And my Nana says, my dad was born in the home hospital in Montreal. Well, anyone knows St. Lambert is a suburb of Montreal, but that's very general, right? He knew a little bit more specific, but he wasn't specific at all. So here I am looking for more information. I heard it from my Nana, and she goes, Montreal. I'm like, okay, we're in Montreal, right? So basically, information can change over time, and that cognitive bias, if I just said Montreal, it may not be accurate, right? He may not even have been born in the home hospital in St. Lambert because he didn't live in St. Lambert his whole life. He lived outside in Ville-Sainte-Marie, Ville-Sainte-Julie, areas like that, so it could have been anywhere, right? So things like that can change. Ignore that cognitive bias. Use the evidence you have to prove it. He, in fact, was born in St. Lambert. It leaves me just confused. So I talk about this. Conflict is good, okay? In some cases, it's good because it allows you and challenges the fact, right? Anyone who knows me loves the fact that or hates the fact for the most part that I play devil's advocate a lot of the time, just because I like doing it. It's fun. But when it comes to the records and evidence you find, there is a collection of records. Anyone familiar with early Albany Beverwyck records? No? Okay. Well, in the early sections of New York, the area of New York, Manhattan, it was the Dutch colony. And they kept a lot of their minute records, their court minutes and whatnot, and they published them online, and I actually bought copies of them to read through. And I have an ancestor, one of my first ones to ever land in North America was Peter Quackenbush. And we've known that in our family tree forever, Peter Quackenbush, great. But this court minutes, in the same court register, he went by Peter Quackenbush and Peter Bont. And the judge referred to the wife of Peter Bont, and that she will pay the fees owed by her husband, Peter Quackenbush. And you're going, is she married to two different guys? Like, what is this, right? Then you go back and read other copies of these court minutes, and it's the same thing. He's used both names, which made me go, okay, well, which name's which, right? You don't know. Is Bont his adopted name? Is Quackenbush his adopted name? Did he just not know how to say Quackenbush and came up with Bont? Like, what is this, right? So, and why would he choose Quackenbush as the name? So, but it made me question things. If this did not come up, I never would have questioned it. I would have said, well, it's Peter Quackenbush and let it be, right? He's from this area. He came from just outside of Oostgeest outside of Leiden in Holland. That's where he came from. So nothing's it's different, basically, from what I know. What it made me do is question it. And when I went to a conference in Syracuse just this past year, I talked to someone who's really familiar with those court records and with that area. And at that time period, there was, anyone familiar with the French Huguenot movement into America? There's actually two movements. There's the first one that no one really knows about, and the second one where a lot of them came. Well, my family apparently came through the first set, the first movement over. And Bont was actually their French name. And they adopted Quackenbush being part of the Dutch colony because they lived near the forest of the croaking frogs outside of Leiden. And that's kind of how that name came to be. So my original name is actually Bont, but obviously it's been translated to a Dutch name. And a lot of the names like that, when you see around in the New Netherland colony, they're adopted names because they fit into the community. They took a name, you see it today with immigration. People come over and no one can pronounce the immigration name, so they pick a name and that's how it is, right? Same thing happened back then. So if I didn't have that conflict, I never would have found that out. And that took me in a whole different direction because I just assumed they're all Dutch. But then I'm like, well, how come no one's blonde in my family? Right? Like, how come I have none of these, Dutch traits and that type of thing? So it makes sense when I look back and look at some of the history, and it takes me back further in actual factual records to go look. Because if I'm looking in Holland and it's in France, that's a big difference, right? So conflict is good sometimes. A tool I like to use is called Evidentia. I've talked to some people about it. If you haven't seen this, check it out. There's some videos on YouTube. They've done a really good job of explaining how this tool can help. I'm going to go through it pretty high level, but it simplifies how you look at sources. If you're stuck with a source or with a brick wall, you want to use this because it's going to help look at your sources a little bit differently than you would normally. The normal way we look at it is that you say, we're John and Cindy. This is my parents, John and Cindy. Were they married? And you go, yeah, I found it in a marriage register. Great, check. What this program does, flips it around. Say, I got a marriage register. What information do I have on it? Well, John's mother, Helen Walton, was a witness. Okay, well, why is my grandmother's name Helen Walton? Shouldn't it be Helen Quackenbush? Right? So question that. John and Cindy were married. It does prove that fact. It says Cindy's parents were John and Ann Howell. They were witnesses. Again, they were alive at the time, right? So these facts go really well to help prove residency. It may give their current residence in Toronto area, right? What it also does, maid of honor was Ann Dixon, okay? Now this is my godmother, and I've been doing her family history. This marriage register from my own family history can work in her family tree to help prove her residence at the time, right? So these sources may not actually be just centered to your family history, but can be, if you have family and friends that have really worked closely together, it could go off into other family trees as well. So it reverses the order of evidence, and that's how I like to look at things now. And this software really taught me that, to look at every piece of evidence in this kind of a way, rather than just look at the traditional, prove, done, move on. So this is Evidentia. This is the home screen for it, basically, and it gives you some options on the side here. There's actually a tutorial for it, but you can go through a document a source, catalog the claims. So you have a record up here. This is a birth record for Raymond Brooks Thompson. It connects with Family Search. So it actually can map people. If you have your tree on Family Search, it'll map together with that. You can put a claim in here, right, to say, this says, Hitty F. Brooks was born in Abington, Massachusetts, recorded as January 19th, 1910. That's not a primary source. It's secondary because it's not there at the time of the event, right? So secondary fact for her, right? And it talks about who the people were. So you can actually say, well, here's a residence fact, here's a birth fact that can relate back to that person. And it goes through, you can categorize all these claims on this document in this. And that's basically what that page does, is basically this. You take one record and you pull out all the facts that come out of it. And amazingly enough, this is one of the easiest ways to break down brick walls, is to take all the facts you have today in your family tree and look at them in a different light. So I challenge anybody who has a brick wall, try, maybe not, you don't have to use the software to do it, but just take a different look at what information is on those sources. So it talks about analyzing the evidence, whether or not you're proving a fact with it or you're disproving a fact with it, whether it's positive or negative, whether there's different spelling variations. For example, it's a common spelling unit as Thompson, but it's listed as Thompson in a different way. His age could be different, all that type of thing. So it allows you to go through and create a proof report about a certain fact and work through it a little bit more in a organized fashion, I guess to say. Then it allows you to write a conclusion about all this information you have on this source, to say, what information do I have? And I'm currently working on this particular person born between here and here, possibly here, and you can summarize what you have, what you found out by doing that. And what happens at the end, when you click generate, it generates this research report. And I attach this. I've done it a couple times with Evidentia. You don't have to necessarily use this again, but it allows you to basically say, you have some facts for this person, these are the facts that are available, and these are the number of occurrences you can have with all these sources to help prove these facts. And then again, it automatically generates these explanations to say where this information came from and how you can use it further. And this comes out in a PDF document. It's probably about 2 pages long. And you can actually attach this to a person, and that explains all of the conflicting information you may have. It explains how all the sources are related to each other and how they all prove a certain fact. So in short, evidentia basically separates the concept of a claim from the facts, right? It allows all the claims to be attached to one subject, so you don't have all this information just kind of floating around, and you're using all of the evidence. It creates a justifiable conclusion about all the facts that you have, and documents the thought behind it through summary and through this research report. There's a 14-day free trial for it online on evidentia.com. It retails for $30. Usually you can get a conference deal if you see it at a conference, a little bit cheaper. But I encourage you, if you have a brick wall, just again, you don't necessarily have to use the software. It's a great program, not going to lie, but you don't have to necessarily use this. So I say search or research. Search, then research. Understand the database you're searching in. Why do I need to search? Because the hints appear in my family tree, right? Well, is the phone going off? Is that, no? Okay. Mine was vibrating. I was like, maybe that's me. The hints appear basically in the top 10 of their databases on Ancestry. And the #1 database on Ancestry is public member trees. I think I've mentioned that before. And so you're not going to get reliable sources necessarily just from that. You want facts and sources. So I always say when you start to search, ignore the public member trees until you start finding some sources. If you can't find any sources, keep looking. And then if you can't, check out a tree and then go and try to find the sources if the tree doesn't have any. It may help you lead you in the right direction, but again, you want to get rid of that cognitive bias that this person says this person was born here. You don't want to lead you down that path to say, I'm only going to search there because this person said so, and ignore maybe these other 5 things that I could find on my own. So I talk about searching. Gather an understanding of what's available in the record sets. Use a card catalog. Ancestry has a card catalog. Find My Past has the record set A to Z. You can actually search and just to see what they have available for what you're searching for. And I talk about iterative searches a little bit more after the next screen. So this is the Canada voter lists, 1935 to 1980. These are our electoral rolls in Canada. And if I scroll down, you always want to scroll down, look at that source information to see where is it coming from, right? Is it a compilation of other databases? Ancestry does that sometimes. They take information from this database, this database, this database, put it all in one, call it one big master search. Look at these sources and say where are they coming from. So this originally comes from the voter list, federal elections, Library and Archives Canada, Ottawa. Plain and simple, it's from this record collection, RG 113B. You keep going down, it tells you more about the database. You want to always learn more about what you're searching in, right? Because if you're going to start searching and nothing's coming up, you think, oh, that person isn't there. Well, it may not even be here in the collection in the first place, right? So if I pull this up, it talks about by 1935, the earliest voting records are in the database. The franchise has been extended to both men and women at age 21 by that time. Before that, it was women, I think, in the 30s, and before that, women weren't even included. So this has both men and women age 21 and over. And then it talks about if you own property, you were only shown in the records before after 1948. And again, it had exclusions for people and lists the year when they were removed here. And that's talking about the Inuit and anybody on reserves. And then what you can find. What information are you actually going to derive from these records? So that's something you want to look at as well. This is key. When you look at the database, know what you're searching. This database includes the following general election years. Those marked by an asterisk have been indexed. Others are available for browsing only. So if I'm looking for someone in the 1980 voter list, let's say here in Hamilton, and I can't find them, that's why, because they're not indexed yet. It's only images available, so you have to browse, click image by image to go through them. And same for 1979, but all the rest have been indexed. They may not be the best spelling. OCR technology, again, bear with it. If you see any mistakes when you're looking through these records, make corrections for people if you're there. It helps. We're all in the same game together. Again, using OCR technology, again, it's not the best, but they ask you to find and correct any errors as you come along with them. Iterative searches. So I'm going to go through here to here. And when you start to search, don't just put a name in and go, that's it. I'm going to look for this person in this database if they're not there. Find out what information you are looking for in this database as a whole, what you have available. So I put in here, if I'm going to do a search, the country and the year range, just to get a rough idea of what I'm looking for, right? That'll narrow a lot of these collections in terms of results and give me an idea. Say, let's say in Canada I'm searching in these voter lists, and obviously it's going to be Canada, but I put a year range. Let's say 1935 to 1949. That gives me how many entries are actually in that specific collection at that time. Then I add in, let's say, Ontario. Shrinks that database down a lot, right? Add the township. Shrinks it down even more. Then the town. Now I'm maybe looking at maybe a couple hundred. Maybe for a city a little bit more, but for a town, looking for a lot less people there. And then add in the surname. Not the first name, but the surname. So how many Quackenbushes are living in this town at that time? It gives me a rough idea, because then I'm going to go look and say, oh, I see all these other names along with it that I can actually go and play around with after. But doing it in this order gives you a rough idea of how many people you're matching with in this database, and what you're dealing with in terms of volume, because again, 16 billion records ancestry, right? It's a lot. So you want to drill that down, okay? And then add in the given name. Shrink that down even more. So to research, so the first part, you're not actually searching for who you're looking for, right? You're searching for what you have available to you in that database. Searching. Research. Dive deeper. Add in the names. This is where you're going to start comparing records at this point. So from a timeline perspective, it's always great to, this is a picture of my family tree, by the way, creating a timeline. Oh, it's these dots again. This will take a minute. These dots are all numbered with events in a lifetime. So you have one, you have your birth, your baptism, your census, another census, for example, marriage, census, death, burial, and so on, right? So that's kind of like the most high-level view of a person in a profile, right? So there's some gaps we have that we could, okay, what's happening in these years in between all these events that are happening, right? What could I find? So this is my two-times great-grandmother, Bridget Mary Gallagher. She was born in York, in Yorkshire, England in 1890, right? So if anyone knows the census records in the UK and as in Canada, they run on the 11, on the 1. So 1891 would be her first census that she'd be in. She married my two-times great-grandfather in 1918. She's a war bride while he was stationed up in York. And I know from that marriage record that her father was Thomas Gallagher. Now when the dots are going to come back. I'm going to delete these dots after. And that's everything. So I put a timeline on here to say here's all the years in between here, and these are all the events that happened. And you'll see there are some gaps here. For example, I know I've been looking for like a 1901 census, for example, and I have the 1911, 1921. By this time they're in Canada, but where's that 1901? Start from the beginning. So I searched, and another dot. Here's some gaps. Oh, dear Lord. Don't use animations in your presentations. There we go. So she's in the 1891 census, not in the 1901, and she's back in the 1911. Cannot find her in the 1901 at home. I mean, she would have been like, what, 11 years old at the time, so I'm thinking okay, she would have been at home. It's not an age where it's old enough to be kind of pushed out type of thing. But strange, because I cannot find her anywhere with her family. Found the family, not her. Weird. I'm thinking, well, she didn't die, so I'm here today, so that's kind of strange. So I found her parents and siblings in the census. Now, this really works as negative evidence, right? I didn't find her. That means something, right? Why isn't she at home? So now I know I'm not looking at home, right? I know I'm not looking at the specific address for her. Well, that kind of opens up a whole field. Where is she? Right? That's the question you ask because, okay, is she close to home? Kind of what's happening. So She's 10 to 11 years old. She's female. She's born in York. She's not living with her parents. I found a Bridget Gallagher that matched that description, but not in York. Up here in Cox Lodge in Northumberland, which is up more Durham way. And it's actually in a place called Ashburton Home, St. Elizabeth, in this record. And if I find her here at the bottom here, Bridget Gallagher, 10. She was born in York, Yorkshire. I'm thinking, okay, this is really like not even in the same county. Right? This is further away. Why is she here? If this is her, why is she here? So again, I did some research. I'm like, okay, what's this Ashburton Home? Right? I found this record on childrenshomes.org.uk, and it gave me some information. It's a Roman Catholic school in Gosforth. It's an industrial school, and a lot of girls were admitted to industrial schools to get some training on how to be a housewife, and a lot of training of life skills, knitting and sewing, and et cetera, et cetera. So it says here at the bottom under records, because I'm looking for these records now, no records noted at present for this establishment. Thinking, oh, that's great, right? But I read up here, the school was closed in 1906, okay? And the girls and residents were transferred to Darlington. Ashburton House was demolished around 1907. I'm thinking, okay, well, she wouldn't have really been old enough at that time. In 1906, she would have been, like, it could have been 16, but not quite. I'm thinking that's the age maybe she would have been kicked out. So there's a chance maybe she went to Darlington, right? Follow this whole path, right? So I find the Darlington home. It's called St. Joseph's, and under record it says they're under St. Cuthbert's care in Newcastle upon Tyne. What do? Contact them. They're still around today. They're more of a outreach kind of facility nowadays. This is what they sent me. Ashburton House, St. Elizabeth Industrial School, Bridget Gallagher, born the 16th of June, 1890. Well, this proves it's her, and that's her birthday. Her baptism was 29th of June, 1890, and they basically asked for, this is a request to the Reverend Father to confirm that she was baptized in the church at the time, to confirm that is her as a person. Name of child, Bridget Gallagher. Term of detention, until 16 years old. Okay, why? why is this happening, right? So I started to look through some of these records, and there's actually about 4 pages to this. But it gives me the information here, her date of birth, and where she was born. She's Roman Catholic. She's been baptized, where she was baptized, the church here too. And with what charged? Not under proper control. She's a rowdy one, right? Crazy, right? You're thinking, okay, well, Granny Quackenbush wouldn't have been like that, I don't think. But apparently this time she was. Her previous character was good. She's not illegitimate. And these are her parents, Thomas and Margaret. Well, I knew her father was Thomas, so again, that proves that fact again, this is her. And it says their address. Mother lives at Rosemary Road, Navigation Road, York. Father, present in prison for ill-treating his child, a boy. Well, this is really starting to go back and make some sense as to how this family is really operating. Your father was a laborer, character very bad. Gives you an idea of kind of how he was, right? Some characteristics that you're not going to find anywhere else other than some of these records, right? You're not going to find that on a birth record or that type of thing. And it gives me her place of birth, Long Close Lane in York, and she can read and she can write. And it says here that the school board of the city of York basically sent her here. So that's where her detention was. The school board, the city basically sent her there. And it says the father is serving 1 month right now in York Castle for ill-treating his son. Well, okay, now that makes me go, that's interesting. I want to know more about that. Well, do you know that you can actually get the prison records from Wakefield? It's all combined under Wakefield Records on Ancestry. And I put in a spreadsheet all of the instances where her father was arrested and put into prison. I believe, I hate to say how many times, I think it was 17 times in 11 years he was in prison. And you'll see, from the 14th of December 1900 in New York, obscene language, crazy, neglecting children, non-maintenance, sleeping in open air, vagrancy, debt, civil debt. A lot of these civil debt ones were the fact that he didn't pay the school fees that the city had then sent her to, right? He had to still pay, but he couldn't afford it, so they're sending him to jail. And then industrial school arrears. Again, they actually listed it out here too. And then talks about, as you get down here, you'll talk about assault, stealing boards, begging, and then I still don't know what the DK is. I have to find that out, but it's just all it says is DK. I'm like, don't know. I don't think they don't know. I don't think they. I think they know why he's there. So, but it goes through and it gives me a whole explanation as to his age. Well, he goes from age 37 all the way to age 48, but in here he's 34 for some reason. He's 46, so 34. So if I'm looking at these records, I'm saying, well, that's not him. That's not him. But every time there's an entry in the prison records, they actually list here the remarks. This number. So 14774 is actually the last entry. This is this number here, 14774. 3414 refers to the last time here, 3414. There's some missing here, but 12695, I believe it's over here, 12695, you're going to see how they're related. All the numbers here. So they basically show the last time the person was imprisoned. And you can actually follow that pattern all the way through the records, which is really easy until you get to the end where there is no remark saying he never was imprisoned after that, at least to my knowledge. Could have moved and gone somewhere else, and judging by his very bad character, he very well could have been. So you can basically take that information and go back and find, there's the York City court minutes and that type of thing to find out why he was charged. Particularly the case example, they wrote about everything in the newspaper. Best place to go for British newspapers is the British Newspaper Archive. And I will mention it's not built for genealogists. Okay, this is built primarily for people doing research in universities and for accessing records at a city level, but not for genealogists. So bear with it if it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're trying to search particularly for people, they're looking more for article-based. Okay, but it does have great search tools here. So I put in here Sir Charles Lemon funeral. Again, this is one of my ancestors, this Charles Lemon business. And it'll talk about when things were last recently added, today or the last 30 days. I can drill down and filter. Some great filtering tools. Filter by date range. And as you drill down by date range, if I choose a year, it then gives me a year range. It gives me a particular year. I click on that year, I can drill down to a month. I can drill down to a week, and then a particular day. So it really has a great filtering tool. Filter by newspaper. Drill that down. Or by region, if I know the region of the country I'm searching in. So this one here is not necessarily the one I'm looking for. Based on the date, 1929, Dover Express, Kent. I know it was in Cornwall. I know it was before that for sure. But it gives you a good summarization. And you're able to see here, this is the OCR. So a lot of it makes sense, except for when you get to some of these, you're going to find some letters and characters doesn't really make sense. It's like a star in there. Probably wasn't a star in the actual record. So I can go back. I drill down here. I chose February 1868 because I know that's the year he died, and the day and the month. Then it gives me a week here, right, of what I can search for. So I can leave it just to a week and see what was published that particular week on this topic. And I added Cornwall, England to drill down to the source because I said, if I'm not going to look for his death record in London newspapers particularly, I want to see what's more local because they probably cared more about him locally than what's in London. In London, the line says he died. In Cornwall, you'll see. This is the Cornwall Gazette, Tuesday, February 20th of February, 1868. So it summarizes this out, talks about the number of words, almost 1,000 words in this article. Probably a lot of information. There is. The funeral of Sir Charles Lemon, and it literally goes through and talks about his remains were deposited into the Mylord Church vault. Well, that's great. Now I know exactly where he's buried, right? A lot of this information you find in these records is newspapers are going to take you further beyond any record out there. It says he wished that the funeral was to be conducted in a plain and simple manner, right? So he didn't really want all that craziness that goes along with funerals. At noon, the procession, including between 60 and 70 carriages, a lot for that time, was marshaled and was soon in motion. And it talks about who was in the first carriage, who was in the second carriage, and the third and fourth. It goes through all of these as I go through the record. It then talks about this particular one. I think it's a bit weird, but Then came the hearse drawn by 4 horses. The coffin containing the body of the baronet consisted of 3 shells, the inside of delf, the second of lead, and the third of oak. The whole was covered with rich black velvet fastened with silver studs. So you can really picture it. I don't really want to picture it, but you can picture it, right? The sides bore the armorial bearings of the family, worked on silver plate, and the lid was plate, also with silver, which was engraved to Charles Lemon. So I can kind of picture what that looks like if I wanted to. And it goes through and talks about who was in, again, who was in all the carriages. And it lists everybody, right, that literally followed in this procession. This tells me he was, you know, quite well off, I assume, or quite well known or quite liked. It talks about, I won't go through all of this because it's a lot of reading. If you're interested, I'll send you the article if you're really interested. But it talks about, I'm trying to find the exact spot here. Yeah, after the ceremony, the family examined the vault before leaving the church. The procession then returned to Carclew in much the same order as it had set out. Carclew was the family estate, obviously. Though dying at the ripe age of 83, Sir Charles had left behind him his sister, age 87, so I know she's still alive. She's the last survivor of 8 sisters. I only had 5. And the only remaining member of the family, the first baronet. Sir Charles, leaving no issue. The property passes to his excellent and estimable nephew, Colonel Tremaine, the second son of his younger sister, who married Mr. Tremaine of Helligan in 1813. A lot of information there I can take and further drive in my research. So, Find My Past, the world subscription is $315 Canadian. That is, again, for the full premium, full deluxe Find My Past. You can search anywhere in all their collections. You don't need the British Newspaper Archive, because if you take that information in that source citation of the article over to Find My Past, you have a subscription here, you can actually put the information in the newspaper section and pull up that article there. They're owned by the same company. Newspapers are in both places. So you don't need this to pay $136 for this, and if you're an OGS member, you get 50% off the Find My Past World subscription. So it's $157. But I believe if you become a member of OGS before the end of this month, I think it's just this month, you'll get a free starter subscription to Find My Past. And then you can actually upgrade again and get 50% off for the full world later on if you wish. But again, you don't need to get the BNA subscription if you have the world Find My Past. Talk about this. This is something that people aren't generally aware of, is that you can actually take, if you're familiar with this section of wills and administration on Ancestry, this is a picture of what one looks like. This is actually an excerpt from the actual record itself. It's not just a summarization. You can take this information over to the government website and find a will and get the full copy of the will digitally right here into your inbox. And you don't have to go to Q or get your friend or bribe a friend or cousin to go there and get that for you. You can actually go in here and search 1996 to present wills, or wills and probate 1858 to 1996. Before 1858, they fell into the Court of Canterbury. Those are usually available at the local county archive. Okay, so anything before 1858, local county archive. 1858 to 1996, that's where you're going to find a lot of these. So you just plunk in the surname and the year of death, and it doesn't bring that up. It brings up a search page, and you can actually add that to your basket. £10 for the whole will. It may be 2 pages, maybe 42, as some others can come back as, if they're really well administered, or if there's some people contesting the estate. They'll be longer and longer, but it's £10. You create an account. It comes in to your account here. You have it for, I think, 30 days. After that, it's gone. You just download it to your computer, and you have it forever. All right, make sure you download it, because after 30 days, it goes away. You have to pay again. Guilty all the time. I just keep reading, download it. But this is what one looks like. This is Samuel Blair Lemon. This is my 3 times great-grandfather, and formerly controller of accounts for Her Majesty's Tea, Her Majesty's Customs in the City of London. Lived in late of Camberwell in the county of Surrey, and it talks about the date he died, where he died, and then talks about who were the executives of the estate at the time, and who administered it from there.
May I have your attention, please? The
Yes.
library is closing in 30 minutes at 9 p.m.
Thank you.
The washrooms will be locked 10 minutes before closing. The public computers shut down automatically in 15 minutes, so you will need to send your print jobs to the printer.
So we're just getting a notice that the library closes in 30 minutes, so we're going to go through this fairly quickly, actually. We don't want to get locked in here. So this talks about, if you can read some of this writing, it took me a while to actually pay attention. I had to go through it really, really closely, but I zoom in on this particular section. It says, my watch and also my china bowl, of which I hold a high value, I give to my son Charles, my watch, which belonged to my dearest wife. I bears the initials RL, went to Charles. Okay, now this is my two-times great-grandfather. I'm thinking, when I'm reading this, well, he had how many kids? How many were left there? Okay, well, that's my great-grandmother, and then my Nana, and like there's Hilda and my Nana, so one of them might have this. So when I went to visit my dear Aunt Hilda in Salt Spring Island, BC, last November, I found this. And this was given to her for their marriage, I believe it was. It talks about that further on. That RL, so you look at this and say, okay, well, he died in 1868 or 1866, I forget which one it was, 1866, I think. If I go back before that, they were married in the early 1800s, right? And this watch was still around then. So, and it still, looks pretty good condition. I don't think it really works that well, but I'd love to get my hands on it. But Aunt Hilda does not want to give it up, unfortunately. Even though my Nana said, you need to give that to me, she goes, no, not at all. So I'll leave it really there. I think I talked about that as well. I have some notes here. I talked, I think, last time about Rodney Green in the Quinte branch. So small story, I'll wrap it up here, is that I went to do research about the Quackenbush family down in Trenton, Ontario, where a lot of the Quackenbushes came over into Prince Edward County area, and they settled all around Northumberland County and Prince Edward County. So I thought Trenton might be the best place to go. The library there, the Quinte OGS branch. The chair of the branch said I couldn't be there to meet me, but he made sure someone there would be there in his place, and he did, and I went. And this gentleman sat there, his name's Rodney Green, some people might know him, he's an OGS member. He told me, he said, my first bath was given to me by Mrs. Quackenbush. I'm thinking, that's kind of crazy, Mrs. Quackenbush gave you your first bath, okay, which Mrs. Quackenbush is this, right? So we matched it out, basically, and she's not a direct ancestor. She's one of my aunts and uncles type of thing. But he mentioned, I said, you know what, I don't understand. There's so many Quackenbushes that came over into this area, into Prince Edward County and settled here. How come, my mom grew up in this area too. She never met a Quackenbush. She moved to Toronto and met my dad in Toronto. So I don't know how she never really met a Quackenbush. And he asked, he said, well, what's your mom's name? I said, well, Cindy Howell. Well, she would have been Cindy Howell. And he goes, any relation to Al Howell? I said, well, that's my grandfather. That he passed away a couple years ago. He goes, Al Howell was my foreman at Bell Canada for 20 years. I'm thinking, oh my God, that's great. And he told me stories about my grandfather that I never would have heard anywhere else, because he was a different kind of character at work than he was at home, obviously. But he imitated him, and his accents that he used to do, the French accent he used to put on, and I couldn't believe it, right? These stories he's telling me, I never would have heard from him because he passed away. And it was like, I went there for the Quackenbush side, but heard about the Howell side, and it blew me away. And that's why I said, you have to just kind of open your doors up to feed questions out there, because you never know what you're going to get at the end of the day. I went there for Quackenbush. I got a hell of a lot more than Quackenbush. And more information. I think I didn't really care so much with the Quackenbush at that point. I'm like, hey, tell me more about Grampy, And he said, oh, your grandfather used to come over to my house all the time. I'm like, really? So he goes, yeah, right across the road from the Quackenbushes. I'm thinking they were on the other side of the road, this family, and no one knew about these people, right? And this is you're so close to meeting families and intertwining, but not, and living in the same area and just never meeting, right? I think it's very interesting. So that's my Quackenbush Howell connection. So I'll leave it there. Thank you all for coming tonight. And thank you to all those who are online. For those of you who are going to be watching this, it'll be in the members only area, recorded, and there forever. So if you want to go back and watch this online, feel free. And again, thank you for joining tonight.